Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Omnicon's webinar series. We are broadcasting live from our international headquarters in New York. We are very excited to have so many of you joining us for this presentation. I am Alexandria Scover, and I am part of the Omnicon marketing team at the Omnicon Group. And I will be your moderator for today's webinar entitled, An Insider's Look at Preparing for a Successful DO-178 Audit. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, you can submit them through the chat box on your screen. We are very excited to be hosting this webinar for you today, and please stay tuned until the end to learn how to obtain your free DO-178 checklist. I would like to take a moment to introduce to you the Omnicon Group. Established in 1984, our company is a recognized leader in providing engineering services and developing products for our global customer base. Omnicon effectively handles technical challenges within aggressive schedules, which along with our engineering professionals is how we have gained a 96% repeat customer base. As experts in complete software development and flight certification, the Omnicon Group specializes in complete DO-178 support for the entire life cycle of your project. In addition to software engineering, our award-winning engineers assist our customers in reliability, maintainability, and safety analyses, designing critical hardware and software solutions, and developing test equipment and test solutions. Omnicon can support you for the full life cycle of your project and work as a part of your team to achieve your engineering goals. An insider's look at preparing for a successful DO-178 audit will be presented by Omnicon's Director of Software Engineering, Vincent Sweeney. Vinny has over 30 years of experience in software engineering and has been at Omnicon for over 10 years. He has extensive knowledge of the DO-178 process and deliverables, as well as development and program management for all design assurance levels. He serves as a lead on many audits, as well as a technical lead on all software development programs. We are eager to hear Vinny's presentation, so with that, I will give the floor to you, Vinny. Welcome.
Thank you, Alexandria. First, let me say good morning to everyone, and thank you for participating. Looking at the list of participants, there are many names actually that I recognize. So to all of you, always a pleasure to have an opportunity to chat. To those that I don't know personally, let me take this opportunity to welcome you and to introduce myself and to move forward with our presentation, while also thanking you and effectively meeting you for the first time. So thank you very much. A couple of things just to kind of set the stage, and as we move forward, a couple of things to discuss and to talk about as far as what we will be covering and also what we won't be covering. The purpose and the focus of the presentation is more around preparing and conducting and participating in the audit. This is not a DO-178B or DO-178C introductory presentation. It does expect that you have some cursory knowledge of the DO-178 process, but even those that are new to the process will benefit. What we would like to try to help you achieve as a result of this presentation today is how can you best guarantee a successful audit, and what are some of the mistakes or what are some of the stumbling blocks based on our experience that would help you succeed in your next DO-178 audit. As you may know by now, DO-178C has become widely accepted as the standard going forward. However, with the number of legacy programs that are currently active at various companies and aircraft manufacturers, and even some new programs that are still coming online today, DO-178B still has a very prominent place in the industry. What we're going to try to do today is not be slanted towards either standard, DO-178B or C, or we've come up with some of the things that are basically common to both. There's one slide that does touch on one or two points that are specific to DO-178C. However, again, we're going to focus on things that are common to both. Here are listed are a couple of reference documents. Many of you should be familiar with these, at least at this point, but just in case you're not, we're going to make reference to these during the presentation. Obviously, there's the DO-178B or C standard. There's the software approval guidelines. This is an FAA order as it's listed here, 8110.49. These guidelines provide some additional background information and detailed information that should help you prepare not only for an audit, but just in general throughout the DO-178 process. And lastly, there's a job aid that's provided by the FAA conducting software reviews. This is a job aid that most of the DERs will use as the basis for their reviews. And all three of these documents, as well as some others that we'll mention later on in the presentation, are available on the FAA website. As I mentioned, we're not really at this point going to go into an introduction of DO-178, but I do have a slide here that's calling out some of the basics that we're going to be referring to during the presentation. There's the obvious stages of involvement audits, and that's what this presentation is all about. There's the SOI 1 through 4, and as they're listed here, as you probably know, there's the planning review, the development review, the verification review, and the final review, or that's actually the review that's done just prior to certification. And as well, we'll be making some reference to the design assurance levels, DAL A through E, although for the most part, DAL A through D, with A being the highest, are the most widely used. So why don't we get started? So your company has either just been awarded its first DO-178 project, or it's just another one in the list of DO-178 projects that you have been awarded, and you're a seasoned veteran at this point. Everybody's happy. More money might be coming into the company. Everybody's going to be working and engaged. And then you realize, okay, well, there's more work means more hours, and the euphoria might continue, but then there's a certain sense of reality. And then you just move forward with, okay, how are we going to staff the program? Maybe some time has elapsed between when you bid for the project and then when the project was finally awarded. So there are some things that might have changed. People might be involved in other programs. Some folks might have moved on. Whatever the situation is, there's a whole slew of planning and anticipation that needs to be addressed. And perhaps who the designated engineering representative or DER, or in the case, for example, if you're working with Transport Canada, who the DAD is, the DER equivalent, well, that might not be the first question on your mind. At some point, again, with this focus being around the DO-178 audit process, at one point you're going to want to know who the DER is that you'll be working on the program. And a couple of things to be aware of here is that relationship that you're going to hope to establish is going to be based on a couple of factors. One might be, are you going to be interfacing solely with an internal DER? Maybe the company that you're working for has an internal DER, and their responsibility is to work mostly with the external DER, at least until the time of audit. Are you a supplier directly to the aircraft manufacturer, or are you a sub-supplier where you just may be feeding information back up to the primary supplier, and they have the responsibility for interacting with the DER. Those are all things that very early on in the program and in the project you want to try to establish. You want to establish what that relationship is going to be and how you're going to participate in that relationship. Once all of that or those questions are answered and worked out, very early on, or as early on in the project as possible, meaning you don't want to wait until you're getting ready to conduct one of the SOI audits, very early on in the program you want to try to have an introductory meeting. And you want to keep it relatively short, but there are a couple of things that you just want to try to work out. First of all, there's just that introduction of yourself and themselves to you. It's very possible that you've worked with the DER before, so it just might be more than, hey, how are you? How are things going? How have things been? And here's what we have ahead of us. And if you haven't worked before, maybe someone else, or worked together before, maybe someone else in your company has. And it just kind of gives you an opportunity to get each other at least on the same or in the same playing field. You might also want to ask them if they have any specific or initial points of emphasis, meaning depending on the type of program, depending on the DAO level, there may be certain things that based on their experience, they may want to pay special attention to. That depends on the DER. In general, they're probably going to say, nope, I work off the checklist and I don't have anything specific that I need from you or need you to pay attention to, but it is still worth asking the question as to whether or not they have any special considerations. So now some time may go by. You're getting ready for the first audit, or again, it could be the SOI 1, or you could now be through the process and you're getting ready for your SOI 2 or SOI 3. Regardless, prior to the audit, you would like to get in touch with the DER. Now, it's very possible that if this is a SOI 1, some considerable time has gone by between that introductory conversation that you had and now the actual SOI 1. If you're in between an SOI 1 and SOI 2, again, there may be considerable time, and it can be, 2 months, 3 months, it can be close to a year, perhaps, depending on the size of the program, how much time has elapsed between audits. So you want to get in touch with the DER. You want to understand and make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what the scope of the audit is going to be. Meaning it's very clear that an SOI 1, and I do have a few slides later on in the presentation that talk a little bit specifically about each of the individual SOIs, but don't necessarily assume that for SOI 1 everything is going to be just as per the recipe. You just want to make sure, again, that everyone is on the same page and whether or not there are any specific expectations that the DER might have. You want to make sure that all of the artifacts that are going to be reviewed are available, and how much time the DER might require prior to the audit to be able to review artifacts and deliverables. It's suggested that that is the case. Don't want to necessarily have anyone that's going to be participating in the audit to walk into the meeting cold, because then you're just going to wind up spending a lot of time getting everybody on the same page. Hopefully that helps get everybody together and working together as quickly as possible. You want to make sure that the meeting dates and times are confirmed. For the most part, the DER will set the agenda, or the purpose of this meeting, this conversation that you're having with them, will help both of you mutually set the agenda. But my experience is that for the most part, the DER will set the agenda for the meeting once the meeting dates and times are established. You want to ask the questions as far as will the respective certification authority be attending? I'm actually in the middle of an SOI 3 audit this week, and we have representatives from both Transport Canada and the FAA attending, as this is an aircraft that's going to be certified for both the U.S. and Canada. We have both certification authority or representatives from both certification authorities attending. Does the DER have any special support considerations? When we're talking about travel arrangements, obviously they handle for the most part, if they're flying or driving or whatever that case may be, they handle their own travel arrangements. But if someone's coming to your facility and to your location, your area for the first time, you may have suggestions as far as hotels that you might prefer one over the other. Just some suggestions as to when they get there. If there are any special traffic considerations, being someone from a metropolitan area, if the meeting's going to start at 8 o'clock, and even though they think they might only be 15 minutes away, depending on travel, you just might want to make them aware that it might take them a little bit longer to get to where they want to be, especially on the morning of the first audit. Again, for this specific SOI audit, does the DER have anything special that they want you to consider or to have prepared for them? And the general comment of using reference documents, the reference documents that were listed at the beginning of the program as well as the end of this program should be used. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you are preparing documentation, the respective DO-178 standards clearly define what the content of the document should be, what the content of your checklist should be. However, it may not always be clear as to what the actual content is, but at least the formatting for those documents should follow what's prescribed in the respective standard. Lastly, for this slide, once your meeting is scheduled and you are considering that you may not be ready, consider rescheduling. Now, the other side to this is really you shouldn't move forward with scheduling the audit until you know you are ready. However, there may be some circumstances that arise that might change that fact. And there's really nothing worse than having a DER and or certification authority representatives traveling only to find out that there are issues with your being able to present fully what's required for that SOI audit. That fact, though, however, should really only be a last resort. You don't want to reschedule for the sake of rescheduling. Many times these meetings have been scheduled way in advance, and if you do cancel, you're going to be put back, probably put on the back of the queue, and could be months again until your meeting gets rescheduled. Also now, prior to the audit, you want to identify the team and participants. Obviously, the content of your development team or your verification team, those things have already been established. This is speaking specifically to who will participate in the audit. It's important to have a leader and to appoint the leader. This may very well be the project manager. It doesn't have to be. There may be a technical manager or a technical lead that would be better suited to lead and facilitate the meeting. But the purpose here is just to make sure that there's a single point of contact within your organization as to how that SOI audit is going to be conducted and who's responsible for making sure that everything's ready to go. Will anybody be participating via teleconference? Will they be participating via live meeting or WebEx? Just make sure all of those things are established and ready to go, and have that person serve as the meeting facilitator. It is very possible that during an SOI audit, things can kind of get bogged down into the details, and having someone who has good facilitation skills would be a big plus for choosing a leader. You want to make sure that the appropriate people from your organization attend or are nearby enough to be able to be called into the meeting as needed. It's very important to have everybody there that would be participating in the meeting at some point, at least for introductions. So this way it will cut down on having to stop the flow of the meeting to stop and introduce somebody for the first time. While it's possible that could still happen, it's important to anticipate who would participate in the meeting and have them introduced accordingly. And you want to have people that you know that you can get your questions, if there are questions raised during the audit, which undoubtedly there will be, that they are available, and it just kind of shows your own responsiveness and your commitment to the process. And again, use your reference documents. Depending on the SOI audit that's going to be conducted, utilize the tools that are available to you. You want to determine your own readiness, obviously. And one way to do this is to perform an internal review. And you can use the job aid that I noted earlier in the program or in the slides to anticipate some of the questions that are going to be coming from the DER. If you can get through the job aid and all of the questions and points that are noted with confidence, you're undoubtedly and obviously ready for the audit. You can use your own software QA resource for this purpose. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail specifically about the QA resource because I believe that it's an extremely vital position. But here, if you have somebody that is experienced in the DO-178 process, they can very easily serve as the person that would get you through a dry run or your internal review. After the review is conducted, convene the team, get together and talk about the results, and if there are any findings, any internal findings, try to address them as quickly as possible. One thing to note is that you may also want to consider sharing your findings of this internal review with the DER, because again, it will show them the level of commitment that you have, but also shows some areas that they might have looked at before or thought that they wanted to look at before, that if you took the initiative to go ahead and look at those areas, they just may feel more comfortable in the fact that they can not gloss over, but maybe not do as deep a dive into a specific area. Immediately prior to the audit, make sure all of your documentation is ready to go. If you're going to be doing any live traces, make sure that the infrastructure in the conference room or the facility is all set and ready to go. Make sure that any of the tools that you'll be using have been installed on the PCs. I mean, some of this stuff might sound like Review 101. However, I have witnessed many, enough audits where something as simple as Excel wasn't installed on the PC that they were trying to use, and it just kind of not only is there an embarrassment factor, but there is it just slows the meeting down and kind of hurts maybe some of the credibility that you might have. Some DERs prefer hard copies, and they may come with some of their own hard copies. But in your meeting or initial meeting with them, or the meeting prior to the audit, that might be one question that you would want to ask them. Do they prefer to have hard copies of any of the documentation or artifacts that are going to be reviewed? Some of them just like to make notes on some of the documents. So now you've determined that you're ready. DER, certification authority, participants are all set. Everybody's ready to get together. A couple of suggestions. Some may be obvious, but I'll just give you the perspective if some of these items are not met. I did participate in an audit recently where the facility wasn't the nicest in general, and they had a conference room, and that was their limitation. I mean, again, it wasn't the nicest facility, and the conference room itself wasn't the nicest. But they came in. They had some refreshments for everybody to get the meeting started. They actually, for the audit itself, they came in and brought in some posters and pictures to kind of brighten the room up a little bit. And it did make a difference. It wasn't as though, because I saw the conference room before they did that, and it just set the tone for the meeting and got things off on the right foot. So don't underestimate the facility, and don't underestimate the room that you're going to be sitting in. So provide a clean and professional setting. Very important to make sure that the team is on time. Your internal team. The DER might show up and it's 5 minutes past the hour, 10 minutes past the hour. Folks are kind of streaming in. It just is very important to have everybody there and ready, and to, in effect, greet the DER or certification authority or whoever else might be visiting from the outside. Have them there. Or have your team there to meet them as they come in, as opposed to just kind of coming in dribs and drabs. As the meeting goes on, be confident in the process that you are presenting and the deliverables that you are presenting. You want the meeting to be constructive. It's very easy to have the feeling during the meeting that you're being interrogated. It's very easy to feel as though you're being attacked. Depending on the DER, it might also be their personality, may increase or decrease that feeling. But it is very easy to fall into the trap that you need to defend your process. Be confident, know the process, present what you need to present, answer the questions that you're asked, but don't come across as being defensive. Be open to their suggestions, even if it means saying, okay, all right, I don't necessarily agree, or please let me show you what we did instead of what you're suggesting. Be open to the suggestions, take notes, and you can always circle back either at the end of the audit or as a follow-up action item to give them a response to their suggestion or to their concerns. During the meeting, it's absolutely okay not to have the answer to everything. If you can get someone in to help you answer the question, that is absolutely recommended. You can take an action to get an answer to the question, and we'll talk a little bit about that specifically in a couple of future slides. But again, it's okay not to have all of the answers. You just need to know where to go and where to get them when needed. At the end of a respective audit session or for that day, in other words, or for example, the SOI audit that I'm involved in right now is a 4-day audit. So at the end of each day, we end with a summary of the DER's findings and or actions, and we make our own notes to that. You want to have an agreement at the end of each session exactly what the actions are and what the issues are and what the findings are. That may also give you an opportunity in between sessions to get some of those actions or findings resolved. And again, that's something that we just experienced this week, that when the first session was over, there were some questions or points that needed to be clarified, and we had people go off and get answers that then would be or at the start of the next day, the next session, we were able to go through 3 of the findings or 3 of the actions and resolve 2 of the 3 right there on the spot. So it helps responsiveness. It's also going to help close out the audit at the end. Now, again, it's still meeting time, but now this is the next day. Okay, so this is day 2 or 3, whatever, of a multi-day audit. Again, make sure the team is on time. You want to, again, to dovetail on the point that I had just previously made, talk about some of the actions or findings that you were able to address in between sessions. And again, the session for that day should also end, again, with a summary of findings and an opportunity to close them out. At the end of the audit, so this would be the last day of a multi-day audit, it's perfectly fine to ask the DER to review the content of their report. Many of them that I've worked with actually volunteer it and want to make sure that it's accurate. They may not have for that current day, everything finalized, but one suggestion could be that, let's say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and they expect to stay until, basically a full day. It is very possible, and it could actually be put on the agenda, that you give them a couple of hours to get their report as finalized as they could within that time frame, and then reconvene for an hour before they leave the facility, just to make sure that the content of their report is accurate from your perspective, and they're going to want to know that it's accurate from your perspective. Again, try to close out as many items while the DER is on site. It is also perfectly legitimate to ask for a final copy of the DER's report. Again, they may not have the final available right there at that point in time, but it's absolutely legitimate to ask them whether or not the audit was a pass or a fail. That gives you an opportunity to, in a constructive way, especially if it's a fail, to get an understanding as to why it is a fail and challenge. I haven't seen many, but I have seen one SOI 3 was a borderline failure, and after the parties were able to discuss in a little more detail what the issues were, the DER actually gave them a conditional pass if they were able to provide some additional information within the following week. So these are things that are just very, very important and to have clarified along the way, especially at the end of the audit. So now I have a few slides here specific to each SOI audit, and just a couple of specific points to make. For an SOI 1, the focus is on the planning. It's focused on the PSAC, your development plan, your verification plan, QA plan, CM plan, around the standards, any of the standards that you've established. The biggies are the requirement standard and design and coding standards. We have one customer right now that also has a verification test case standard that they use. You want to make sure that all of your checklists are available and ready to go. I have a note here that says, when in doubt, create a checklist. Basically, the DO-178 standard and job aid and related documents spell out very clearly what the basic checklists should look like. But if you have any processes that further enhance or detail any of these higher level checklists, it's perfectly legitimate to have your own checklist that you can make reference to even in your planning documents. To circle back to the first 2 items, the SOI 1 in the planning documents, especially for software, we kind of tend to maybe at times forget that there are system level requirements that our software requirements were flowed down from. So you just want to make sure that in the PSAC and during the SOI 1 audit, are there any specific system requirements or any requirements related specifically to safety that you need to be aware of and you want to account for from a software perspective, whether you're taking credit for verification of system level requirements or you are or not, or maybe you're in non-compliance. You want to make sure that you don't ignore the fact that that you do have the ARP responsibility, even at the software level. Quality assurance, software quality assurance, and the note here says engage QA early and often. This is where I would just want to talk a little bit about QA and the role that they play. Don't underestimate the role of your software QA team or person. What I have found is the stronger the SQA person, the smoother the audit, quite frankly. If used properly, your SQA resource, while they're an independent line or chain in your organization, if you're following your process and you know your process, they can be your strongest advocate. I know that many times being a software engineer, I almost look at the QA process as maybe something that gets in the way. That shouldn't be the case. There should be a mutual agreement. There should be a mutual respect for the QA organization and the engineering organization, and it will show in an audit. If that relationship is a strong one, a DER can pick up on that very, very quickly. Configuration management. Obviously, you're anywhere along the line, your documents need to be released, artifacts need to be archived. Know the difference between a control category 1 and control category 2 document. Very important. In a nutshell, I mean, the best way that I could explain those or describe those is your CC1s are your documents that need to be archived. They need to be baselined. They need to be maintained in a way that can ensure that all versions of the documents are kept properly. Your CC2 documents are just at a very quick classification. I'd call those your one-shots. Those might be your meeting minutes, review artifacts, problem reports. While archiving those and maintaining those is still required, they don't necessarily have to be through a review process. They don't have to be baselined. So know that difference and employ the configuration management process as early as possible in the process. And again, use those reference documents. Don't recreate the wheel. There's a lot of information out there that can help you along the way. SOI 2, bottom line here is it's all about the requirements. You've been through the planning stage now. You have your system requirements. You're flowing those down into high level, low level, and derived requirements. Make sure that any derived requirements that you have created and derived, hence the name, have been flowed back up to the system engineers for appropriate safety analyses. So make sure all of that stuff is in place. Traceability is extremely important. Use the right tool. Of course, probably the biggest name out there is DOORS. And if you're using DOORS for maintaining your requirements, there's usually never any question around the use of DOORS as a qualified and credible tool. There are others that are out there. PTC Integrity has, formerly MKS, has a requirements management component to their tool suite. JAMA, J-A-M-A, is another one that has requirements management capability. PTC Integrity and JAMA have they're more of like a Windows. They have a very Windows-based feel to them, drag and drop capability. DOORS might not have that, but again, DOORS is absolutely the let's say the industry accepted tool. Your design and your code, make sure that from a design perspective that your low-level requirements are defined and that you are tracing properly and that you have design artifacts, appropriate design artifacts for each low-level requirement, that your code is traceable to design, and make sure that you have enough of a code sample to be able to prove your reviewability as you get ready for the SOI 2. And again, the bottom three are just kind of like becoming now, as part of this presentation, the motherhood and apple pie. Keep QA engaged. They're going to want to be engaged, but make sure that they understand where you are in the process and when the SOI 2 is going to be scheduled. Same thing with configuration management, and make use of your reference documents. SOI 3 is your verification review. This is where you'll obviously be spending a lot of time reviewing test cases and test procedures. But again, it's all about the traceability. The DER is going to want to see traceability from requirements, let's say system requirements or requirements that you receive from your customer, how those requirements are imported, how they are tracked and maintained, how they trace down to high-level software requirements, low-level software requirements, making sure all of your allocations are in place and ready to be audited, that your traceability from requirements to design to code and now down to test and integration ability is all set to go. Just make sure that any samples that you want to provide as proof of verification, you've run through those yourself, and you know that you can start with requirement ID 1 and flow it all the way down through your design, your code, and right down to the test procedure and or test case, and prove that all of those items have been reviewed and you have the proper artifacts to prove that verification. The SOI 4 or SOI 4, this is the final audit, and you want to make sure that your conformity review has been conducted. That's basically under the guidance of or an action of the quality assurance group, that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Depending on the program, this may very well be just, it might not even be in person. This may be an audit that would be a desk audit. Even if it's a DAO-A job, I'm actually working on a DAO-A job now, and the SOI 4 is going to be a desk audit rather than an audit in person. Just like the PSAC, which is probably the most, or at least one of the most important documents that will be presented at the beginning of the project, the software accomplishment summary and the software configuration index, yes, and the lifecycle index also are important, but the two bookends of the process are the PSAC and the software accomplishment summary. And you want to make sure that those are rock solid. Those are the documents guaranteed that will be delivered to the certification authority. They may request others. They may request your development plan and verification plan and the software configuration index, but guaranteed the PSAC and the SAS are the documents that are going to be delivered to the certification authority. A couple of key considerations. So now we're past the generalities of the SOI audit. We're past the generalities of preparing for the SOI audit. Just a couple of things to be aware of and a couple of things to note. And these aren't necessarily specific to any audit. Know the differences that the impact that the impact of the DAO is going to have on your program, whether it's cost or time or the items that are listed here. There's a big difference between a DAO D and a DAO A, obviously. There's not so much of a difference between a DAO B and a DAO A, but there is an impact. And if you've been, if your company has been delivering DAO B projects or developing DAO B projects primarily, and now you need to move to a DAO A, know that impact because there is one, and you want to make sure that you're prepared for that. Obviously along the way from a cost perspective, but also for the audit. You want to know the differences. Here's where I'll talk a little bit more about QA. DO-178 experience for your QA resource is a big plus. It might even be a must-have. I have found that the more knowledgeable of the DO-178 process from the SQA department and or person, the more experience they have. It just cannot be understated. Use them as that resource, not as an afterthought. Don't look at SQA as just either a necessary evil or an unnecessary evil, because that's far from the case. They are your advocate if you use them properly. And I have had the pleasure of working with a number of companies that have a very, very strong SQA department and some that don't. And the difference is not only night and day, it's planets. It's Earth to Mars as far as the difference that your SQA resource can make on your program. When it comes to requirements, and you're dealing with high-level requirements and low-level requirements, requirements writing is a skill. I'll be the first to admit that not everybody can write great requirements. If you need to hire, even if it's temporary, consulting help to write requirements, review requirements, it is an acquired skill. And it's worth having the right amount of experience to help you manage and write your requirements. Traceability, use the right tool. It wasn't long ago that you could get by with managing your requirements in a spreadsheet, and that might still be the case depending on the size of the program or the DAO. But having a tool to automate traceability and to track the development of your requirements and your design and your code is extremely important. Qualified tools. Know what tools you're going to be using. If you're going to be using a code, a tool to accomplish code coverage, make sure that the tool is qualified. If you're going to be using a tool just as an aid to help you along the way and not necessarily take the place of a process, then you can get by without having the tool qualified. But know that you know what tools you're using, whether or not they need to be qualified, and include that information in the PSAC. Structural coverage. Have a target as to what level of coverage you're going to achieve. Experience says 90% is widely accepted, 95% is better, and that's just coverage as far as prior to analysis. So as a result, if you're running your code coverage, anything that's not covered, you're going to provide an analysis for, which will achieve the 100% coverage, but strictly coming out of running your test procedures against your code, 90 to 95% is widely accepted. Are you going to be adhering to the MISRA standard, which most programs at this point do, or at least many do? And what subset of MISRA rules will you be adhering to? What safe subset are you going to employ as part of either a separate standard, or my recommendation is to include them right within your own coding standards, because that's really all they are. They are specific and elaborate coding standards. Again, use your reference documents, and if this is either your first run at a DO-178 project, or maybe you've done 50 DAL-B jobs and you're going to now embark on your first DAL-A, you may want to consider a consultant or someone who has ridden that horse before. Some mistakes to avoid, and I'll kind of go through these a little bit quickly. There are only I only have a couple more slides left, but just in case there are some questions at the end, I would like to leave some time. Don't trivialize the system aspects and the safety aspects of the system, especially the system aspects. And I say especially because the safety aspects, that's kind of ingrained in the process, even if you're doing, even just from the software perspective, you know what requirements are being tagged as safety requirements. But we don't necessarily keep track of the system aspects. And this kind of goes back to one of the previous slides that I had, not to ignore the system side. Don't forget that software, as I say here, is just part of the bigger picture, part of the bigger system. Our software engineers tend to be software-centric, and we forget that these requirements, these software requirements that we're trying to accomplish or trying to provide functionality for, come from the bigger picture. Going into an audit and preparing for the audit, remember that, know that, because there's no doubt during some audit, somewhere along the way, a DER or a cert authority is going to ask you, how do you track, how do you know that you're satisfying the system level requirements? Another thing to avoid, inadequate requirements or inadequate decomposition of requirements. Make sure that you have all of your requirements properly flowed down. Again, requirement writing is an art, and it's a necessity. And making sure that you have a proper level of requirements and traceability and flow down is accurate and very important. So don't fall into that trap. Control coupling and data coupling. This tends to be a point that we kind of put off to the side. At least that's been my experience, that I've seen companies say, oh, well, I'll deal with the control coupling and data coupling later. Control coupling and data coupling are very much a design level consideration. And although structural code coverage is something that's done obviously after the code's written and the test procedures are ready to go, I find that start to consider what your strategy for proving control coupling and data coupling requirements being met, that you do that at the same time you're going to come up with the strategy for structural coverage. We all, how are we going to make sure? We got to get VectorCast, or we got to buy this tool or that tool to make sure that we're going to have proper coverage. And we never think about control coupling and data coupling. My recommendation is that you look at those things, although they're different, you look at those things at the same time to kind of keep control coupling and data coupling on the front burner, not the back burner. Again, don't forget about the tools that you're going to be using and whether or not they need to be qualified and how they're going to be qualified. Are you going to be purchasing a qual package from the tool manufacturer, which comes at an additional cost, and they usually don't come cheaply? Or do they provide perhaps for a lesser cost some things that you need to do in order to prove that their tool is qualified, or you're going to come up with some other way to somehow qualify the tool? Keep that into consideration, because you can get towards the end of the project and realize, oh boy, we didn't qualify tool A and we don't have the time, so let's go see how much it's going to cost, and you find out that the tool qual package from the manufacturer is going to cost you $20,000. So you want to make sure that you give that some forethought, and that's identified in the PSAC. DO-178C, again, the object-oriented development ability has been more widely accepted. However, you still want to avoid the use of dynamic memory, polymorphism, inheritance. Those are some of the things that you want to stay away from if you are going to develop in C++ or some other object-oriented language or model. And lastly, for this slide, I'll just sign off with underestimating, or the mistake would be to underestimate the role of SQA. Strong SQA, as I say here, is a must, and DO-178 experience is essential. A quick look at some of the resources. Again, I've added a couple compared to the first slide, or the first one of the early slides. So in addition to the standard and the FAA approval guidelines and the job aid, there are a number of FAA CAST papers that are available. CAST stands for the Certification Authorities Software Team. They have a number of position papers that hope to clarify some specific points about the DO-178 process, and better yet, how you can accomplish those objectives. The first few items there are all available on the FAA website. And lastly, Omnicon, we have developed over time a number of document and checklist templates that could be made available. I have seen other templates where they're really nothing more, quite frankly, than a table of contents. What we have actually put some meat behind onto the bones of these templates.
Okay, we hope everyone gained some valuable insight from Vinny's presentation. We noticed a couple of great questions come in, so we're going to open the floor to the question and answer portion for the next couple of minutes. Vinny is more than happy to answer some of your questions. So Vinny, the first question is, are pass-fail criteria for a given SOI audit negotiable?
Okay, so if I understand so are pass-fail criteria for a given SOI audit negotiable? The criteria are not. I mean, the rules are established. What's negotiable is whether or not you've met the criteria. And that's where you kind of get into that dialogue with the DER. So the rules and the checklist items are what they are, but how you've achieved and met the criteria is in effect negotiable. I hope I answered that question.
Okay, the second question is, our company is bidding on a DAL-D program. Are all 4 SOI audits applicable at DAL level D?
The answer is yes. The DAL drives more of the amount of rigor and independence that's required. But for a DAL-D, there's still the same number of audits, the same deliverables. Again, the level of independence is different and the rigor is different. But yes, all 4 audits are required, regardless of DAL.
Okay, and we'll do this one final question. Can the DAL level of a program be changed as a result of findings exposed by an audit?
Maybe, can the DAL be changed? No. The DAL is determined by a safety assessment. So the criticality, if a function of that software was to fail, what's the criticality, whether it be loss of life or it would just be a nuisance, basically, in a nutshell, determines what the DAL is. Your findings are, they don't have an impact on determining the DAL.
Okay, thank you, Vinny. Looks like we're out of time. Thank you everyone for being involved in the Omnicon Group's webinar series. This presentation has been recorded and it will be emailed to you along with our free DO-178 checklist. Links of the video will also be shared on our website where you can find more information, omnicongroup.com, and our social media pages, LinkedIn, Google+, and YouTube. We hope that you stay involved and keep up with us for future webinars and for any engineering needs that you may have. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day.